Okay. Thanks everybody for being here. Gracias a todos, compañeros. We're really excited tonight to be doing this is our 37th meeting in 3 years for this group, with the help of the MAIA program here at COLEF, the Center for the Humanities at UCSD, and the Center for Marine Biodiversity and Conservation at Scripps Institution of Oceanography. We're really happy. I think this is our 7th trip down here to Tijuana. We try to come once a quarter. We're very happy to have Dr. Lina Ojeda tonight, who was going to talk a little while ago and then had some unfortunate circumstances. So we're very excited to hear the transboundary landscape. I myself work in the estuary as well as in the canyon here in Tijuana, and so these are all things very close to my heart. I hope you guys will really enjoy it. Just another thank you to Carlos Vasquez for sending the bus to come get us and sending all the students up to San Diego to come visit with us. We really appreciate it, and this is really important for us to continue the binational collaboration. And with that, I don't really have much more. I'm just going to turn it over.
Sí.
Okay, una breve presentación. Do you mind to speak Spanish or would you prefer in English? Spanish? Okay. Entonces voy a hacer una muy breve presentación de la doctora Lina Ojeda. Ella es investigadora del Departamento de Estudios Urbanos y Medio Ambiente, especialista en ecología del paisaje. Y bueno, en esta ocasión nos va a hablar sobre Tijuana desde la perspectiva ecológica del paisaje, y es un tema que ella siempre ha estado trabajando, lleva publicaciones realizadas y asimismo tesis dirigidas por ella en ese ámbito, en esa área de estudio. Pues muchas gracias, Lina, es todo.
Estaba preguntándole a Kyle si era mejor hacer la presentación en inglés o en español, y me dijo que en inglés. Entonces espero estén todos de acuerdo, y bueno, disculpen mi inglés, pero lo voy a tratar de hacer en inglés, ¿ok? Okay, what I did with this presentation is try to put together all the work, almost all the work I've done. I'm a biologist working at COLEF, it's social science. So I shifted from being a biology person to more an environmental studies. And I found out that a landscape perspective from a theoretical point of view was something that I was very interested in. And I was very interested because it's conservation of natural resources, but taking into account human beings. In Mexico, I don't know if you know, but most biologists think that conservation, well, I think in the US also, conservation has to be very far away from people. And I really don't believe that. I think that people are part of nature, so we should find and have to find ways into integrating both, okay? There's a, like a contradictory perception that we can preserve and conserve natural resources while we develop cities or develop any kind of activity, and I don't think that, okay? So I'm a rare biologist that likes to work in the city. That's where most people are in the planet, and in Mexico, 70% of the people are in cities. In Baja California, it's even more. It's around 90. I think it's a little bit more than 90%. So if we're looking for the well-being of humans, we have to see conservation issues from a perspective that can integrate both, okay? And what I have been doing is I like to work in very different scales. Scales are really very important for me. And so historically I work in Tijuana, and I have been working in 3 different scales. And I'm going to be talking about that. And I'm going to start a little bit, maybe a little bit boring, but it's the theoretical perspective I get into, and that has to do with landscape ecology, ecosystem services, and green infrastructure. But then we're going to get into the 3 scales. The 3 scales is the watershed, the Tijuana River watershed that goes into the United States. And then we're going to go into the city to see nature in city or parks in city. And then we're going to go to a place I suppose some of you have visited, is Ecoparque, where I work also, okay? That's a site, a site scale. So the perspective I work with is that there are 2 approaches of what landscape is. One of is what we perceive of it. When we see from a airplane or whatever we're standing at, we see a landscape, and that makes us feel something and see something. So that's an important one, an important concept of landscape. But the other one has to do on how ecosystems work and how they are linked together. When we see patches, when we see the landscape, we see different types of patches, natural and human ones, and they all interact between them. And understanding how these interactions are done is the way we can live with them, okay? And so the way these patches are, the natural ones, are distributed, are the way, it's what's called in landscape ecology the pattern. And pattern can be a continuous area or with very small patches. If you don't follow me, just tell me, please, okay? And the function of this landscape is determined by the fluxes, all the flows that go between these patches. And these patches can be energy, can be water, can be animals, can be seeds, can be plants, can be cars, can be smoke, can be whatever goes between them, okay? And it's and the connectivity of the natural patches, of the natural ones, or even if they're not natural, but the connectivity that makes the flows still work is going to be that what makes a landscape more healthy or not, okay? So that's the base of what it should be. And so from that perspective, if we're going to talk about conservation of ecosystems, there's a theoretical area created by Foreman that says that the best thing to conserve all these flows is protecting big patches. But if we don't have big patches, we can get a lot of small patches, but that they are connected between them. So that's really very important. And there are a lot of Foreman developed, and other authors have developed a lot of principles that we can follow to more or less create a more healthier environment. What happens is when a city or an urban area comes into a landscape, what it does is interrupt all these flows and all this connectivity between the patches, and that makes the landscape start to create problems. Okay, and problems that we'll see, they interrupt these cycles, and then that's why, and they fragment the natural ecosystem, and that's why we lose biodiversity, but we also have floods, and we have different kinds of fire regimens, and we have different kinds of problems because we don't take into account these processes when we design the urban areas or the man-made areas. And we know that although the cities have a very small area in the planet, they contribute to most of the problems that the Earth has. They are key to climate change problems that we have today. They produce urban heat. They produce problems inside the cities because of the impervious surfaces, and they produce problems in air and water quality, and I can go on and on and on and on. And we're not, I suppose most of you know that. But there's another thing that landscape ecology takes into account, and that's the disturbances. And disturbances are a natural process that occur in the landscapes and in the natural ecosystems. And they can be any kind of disturbance, from a rabbit that makes a hole in the dirt, in the soil. That's a disturbance because it modifies the soil, but it also lets oxygen get into the soil. So disturbances, when we say disturbances, we don't have to think that's bad, necessarily bad. We make them bad because we don't take them into account. That's the problem. And what it's a disturbance by Walsh, the definition of Walsh is an event that alters significantly the variation pattern of a system structure and function. But that happens all the time and at all scales. The problem is when these are so hard, so huge that they change things that could be for better or worse for us. And so this can be produced. So ecosystems change all the time because there's always disturbances in the ecosystem. So that's part what happens, okay? And they also promote biodiversity. If there are no disturbances, biodiversity would not be promoted also. And they can be produced by a lot of things. And some of these are abiotic factors, or fire, or wind, or landslides, or volcano, or high temperatures, or low, lots of things that can produce them. This is an example of what happens, a disturbance that happens in a city. It's just one example so you can see. The surface runoff of water in a city with the impervious surfaces we make change the hydrology of the area, okay? There's with more impervious surface, there's more water runoff in the surface, and less that goes into infiltration, okay? And in cities like Tijuana, where we have a rough terrain, this is really very important, okay? So that's we're going to see. And this is very important because there's the concept also of resilience. And although I don't get into this concept in the work I do, it's really very important because the capacity that the system has to suffer a disturbance and still maintain itself maintain the system in working, it's really very important in a city. And when we do things like the slide I put before, what we do is undermine this capacity. Okay, we have problems with this capacity. We do it, and that's really a problem. In the work I do, I don't measure, but it's an important concept to take into account. Okay, and when we talk about land use patterns, when we talk about landscape ecology, resilience depends a lot on the morphology and the land use patterns, especially. Well, a lot of you must know now this is one of the new ways of trying to make together development and conservation, and this is the concept of environmental services. And environmental services are the benefits we get from nature, and this is there are lots of classifications and lots of evaluations on how much they produce and the money that we could get from taking them into account. But it's just to know, so you know that I take this into account in my concept of conservation. And then the last one is this new view of green infrastructure. There are a lot of different concepts. It depends on scale of what green infrastructure means. For me, I like the one that's of Benedict and Mahon that says that's a network of areas conserved, so we can maintain in the landscape the connectivity, okay, and help resilience and conserve environmental services. And I like this view of green infrastructure because it also considers it's based on landscape ecology principles. So it comes from the same area of theoretical area, and connectivity between natural landscapes is really very important in this view, and it builds resilience. Now we're going to get to the first area. The Tijuana River watershed is the first scale I started studying, and you may all know this. It has a rough topography. It has a Mediterranean type climate. It's part of the California province, floristic province, and it's one of the 25 world's hotspots because it has a lot of endemic and endemic species and a high biodiversity, and it's threatened by urban growth mainly. The types of vegetation, there are a lot of classifications, but mainly they are chaparral, coastal sage scrub, riparian vegetation, some pines, some other forests. But that's mainly what the area is. Well, I'm going to show you this because this is a study I started from 1938 with different aerial photographs and different kinds of different kind of sources, and I did it for almost both sides of the border. Not in this one because I couldn't find for the other side of the border. But what I want you to see is in here, because this is Tijuana, okay? This is the watershed. 3/4 is in Mexico, 1/4 is in the United States. And this area is Tijuana. This very small gray patch you see here is Tecate, okay? And this is 1938. This is 56, and I have now both sides of the border. Okay, perdón. Okay. 38. In 56, I didn't have that area. God, it goes. But you can see all what it has grown, okay? Tijuana, okay, it grew a lot, okay? You could see it, yes? Okay. Well, this is what happens. What happens is that the urban area, this is the rate of change, grows in this very high rate of change, and agriculture and grassland disappear because it started as being natural. Okay, so from natural it changes to, especially in Mexican side of the border, from natural it changes to grassland. And grassland is a precursor of urban growth. When you see a place changing into grassland, it's because people are trying to change it to urban growth. But from the landscape ecological point of view, what you see is that the important is that you see is that fragmentation is how the number of patches are growing, and that's fragmentation. And we're going to see it now here. Coastal sage scrub fragmentation. Coastal sage scrub is the pink one. Okay? So if you see, this is fragmenting this side from the one this side. And the border is fragmenting the one this side from the one this side. Then, chaparral. Chaparral is perforating in the United States, the landscape, as well as in Mexico. And the juniper scrub in Mexico is disappearing, and it's fragmented. It's getting patches, a lot of smaller patches. There's a barrier between Mexico and the United States. Okay? And this is the urban use. What happens with urban use? It perforates natural ecosystem. Chaparral is being perforated. And in here there's the urban area of Tijuana is making a barrier with Tecate. So it's going to be disconnected, the part from the north from the south. So this patch over here is being isolated. And that's what's happening also in here, in Chaparral. But the most affected one in the Mexican part of the watershed is Matorral Costero. In the United States, what happens is that it's also happening in Mexico, but what's happening in the United States is that there's more perimeter between urban development and natural patches. So that puts a lot of people at risk, especially with fire. In Mexico, it's like a bulldozer. You know, they destroy everything, and up to 100 meters away from the house, so they are not at that much risk. Okay? And in Tijuana, what we have more is we don't preserve natural vegetation on steep slopes. So the problem is that we have more landslides and problems of floods, risk from both things. Well, as I told you before, agriculture in Mexico has been found to be a precursor of urban development. Not that in the United States. Not the changes are very different in the north part of the border. There's a new publication of the Tijuana River watershed from Ricardo. ¿Cómo se llama? Estuvo conmigo. It's from CICESE. I can put it in there because he did this for 2012. And he looked on the difference between Mexico and the United States, and he already published it last year. I suppose things are most or less the same. Now, the city, what happens with the city? The city has grown really very fast, and although the rate of growth is not as fast as before, it's still very fast. And not only that, it's a very extensive city. The area also grew a lot. Tijuana is one of the cities that has less density in Mexico, the city that has, people are really very widespread. And the problem is that 50% of the city has grown as an irregular settlement. So there hasn't been any planning on it. And that's a really very bad problem here. And it still goes on, not that as much, but it still goes on. But from the origin, 50% has been irregular. And what has happened in a study made by Roberto Sanchez and Nora Bringas, what they found is, in time, what happened is people settled in slopes more steeper each time. So you have, by 2000, a lot of people in those areas, in areas with really very steep slopes. They occupied steeper slopes each time. And well, what has happened that with the modifications of the landscape, what has happened is that there's a reduced infiltration, there's accelerated runoff. I don't know if you've seen in Mexico, but in Mexico, in Tijuana, the cities are like drainage of water drainage, because they don't construct water drainage in the city. So the streets become water drainage, and that's been a problem. And changing to another scale in the city, this is this is a study I did in 1989, and those were the green areas, the parks that we had in the city at that time. That's with greenery also by 1994. But as you can see, the parks, these ones, from 1989 to 1994 to 2010, you don't see much change. What you see is a lot of really very small, very small parks. And you don't see any big park. And what you see is the greenery. A lot of that. In fact, there's the same amount of greenery, road landscaping, as there is of parks. And I think it's more connected. It has more connectivity, greenery. It's not that greenery is bad, but they don't do parks in Tijuana. And this is a study one student made with me, and I think he talked about it one day. And this is what we have. We have these indicators of 2.6 meters per inhabitant, considering greenery, and 1.4 of the city area. So this is to show you the difference, what happens outside the city and what happens inside the city. What's the problem with the urban green areas? Well, as you can see, these are the area of parks. This is the area of greenery. So what they've done in the last years is just greenery, no parks, very small amount of parks. And these indicators have not changed a lot. In fact, they have grown really not much, and the population has grown a lot. And the biggest problem is that these are the big parks, these are the small parks. And as you can see, most of the parks don't have even 12 square meters. That's a yard of a big house. So they're really very small. And they're not accessible. This is from Ever's thesis, and they're not accessible to everybody. And the quality of them is really very bad. Most of them have no vegetation cover whatsoever, and there are very few that have a vegetation cover, and these are the types of facilities they have. And although most of them have 1 to 2 to 3, the problem is that most of them don't work. They're destroyed. So even though they have them, what happens is the municipal government doesn't care about it. They don't think they're important. It's part of the problem. They don't consider them important in the plans. And this is the third level, the third scale. The third scale has to do with Ecoparque. Who has visited Ecoparque? All of you? No? Okay. Ecoparque is a site that we started developing a long time ago, and we've had a lot of bumps in the way, but we're getting to it one more time and seeing if we can do something. Ecoparque is this slope. This is the way we received it. We started this in 1990, somewhere around there, and this is what you can see. Not now, because this is different, but you can see it green, at least. It has a lot of bumps. These are the missions and the vision, but I'm not going to read it to you. What I want to do is tell you what Ecoparque wants to do. Ecoparque wants to be like a sustainability area where you could students and researchers and people can go and try to see or try to develop, put into practice, and learn and communicate a lot of forms to make more sustainable a city. All sustainable technology, sustainable practices, sustainable whatever that helps. And it's like a laboratory that's going to be for the people, and that's what we're thinking about. It started as that, and we're trying to go into that, but as Kyle may know by now, it's really very difficult to make a project in sight in Mexico. It is very difficult. People like it, but nobody gives money. Everybody says it's really very nice, but when you need help, it's really very difficult to get it. Nevertheless, what we think we have different programs in Ecoparque. That's what we want to develop. And the program has to do with water, with a plant. We have a treatment plant, and you're going to see some pictures now. And that treatment plant goes into a tertiary system with a ¿cómo se dice pantano? With it's swamp or no? It's wetland. With a wetland that we're developing. It has plants, but it's not working because we need money for some things. And well, that's not the area I manage. That's Carlos de la Parra who manages that area. And then what I manage and I want to create is like a regional botanical garden. I would like to develop their ways into reproducing native plants. Because in Tijuana, everybody talks about native plants and nobody has it. And if you want to put native plants in your house, you don't have any. You don't have where to buy them. So that's what I'm aiming for. And with those plants I reproduce, well, I'm going to tell it when I go further away. We also have an urban agriculture area that we already have some beds. You're going to see them. An area of environmental and education. We're going to have an energy system with solar panels. And well, this is what I told you about green technologies. Whatever green technologies can fit into Ecoparque. That comes with their own money. Yes. Sorry to say, but that's it. Compost and compost between these two. So this is the swamp. It's not working already. We have two kinds of one is circus. What are the species? Yasmin? Tifa? Tifa and circus. We have Tifa and circus because we want to try both of them. And what we want is to reuse the water that we use, that we treat in the plant. But we're not just going to do that in terms of water program. We would like to do other types of things that you can manage water, like collecting water from rainfall, and whatever technology or thing with strategy we can apply in constructing ecoparque that has to do with water conservation and treatment. This is what I've already developed a plan of what we'd like to see in ecoparque in terms of vegetation. But as I told you, it's really very difficult to get plants. One of what I have in mind to do so is, and what I'm trying to develop now is, it's two main strategies. One of them is making what's called in Mexico UMA, and that's it's called Unidad de Manejo Ambiental. You constitute yourself to the government as an area that develops a strategy to conserve and reproduce plants or animals or whatever, and so you have the permission of the federal government to collect seeds in the wild, and second, if there's a land use change in the city, in the outskirts of the city or wherever it is in the state, I can receive the plants, and that's the way I'm going to try to get them. And I'm happy to say that we're almost done with that thing. We already are working in it, and I hope we get it soon. The second one has to do with association with other institutions that have a lot of experience with that, and that's what I'm planning to do this year. And that has to do. We found that Rancho Santa Ana Botanical Garden has a really very good experience in reproducing native plants, so I'd like to, go visit them and try to develop a collaboration with them. But we already started because in making areas to reproduce native plants. Okay, this is an old one. If you enter to the Facebook of Ecoparque, please put like to Ecoparque. And you're going to see a very nice photograph of Ecoparque. And we're constructing two of these. One is going to be for hydroponics, and the other one is going to be for reproducing native plants. Well, then there's this other big problem that has program that has to do with urban agriculture, and that's developed by Samuel Perez. And we have, as you can see here, we have 10 beds, we say agriculture beds, and we have now another 10 that we already constructed, so we have now 20 of them, and we're starting what's called forest food forest. We're starting to put some trees there, and Samuel is making a lot of progress in that area. It's really very nice. But it's not only this, we're also working with the municipal government, with an ex-student of Maya, of her college, that works in the municipal government, that has a really nice program that has to do with rescuing some two parks that are in very marginal areas in the city. And it's more like what you're doing with Kyle. I don't know who's doing it, but Kyle's doing it. And he's making a really good job in And that's what these people are trying to do, and we're working with them. Well, the energy that we hope, everything in Tijuana is really very difficult. We had a lot of problems trying to achieve. We have solar panels, and the problem was that we had to have a two-side meter of the energy generated. Okay, the one that comes from the government, from CFE, federal, and the one that produces. If we did not have that thing, what happened is that the government charged us even the energy that we produced. But the problem was not that. The problem has to do with administration, and it had to do. Sorry, I'm talking about that. Just to show you how the problem was that the company wanted the money before they gave us the meter, and Mexico government doesn't allow us to give the money before you receive the thing. So we had a really big problem for more than 1 year. So we hope to achieve this meter by, I suppose, in 1-2 months at the most. So we can start this program. And then there's a program of education, the environmental education, that has been for a lot of time. It has been working for many years, and it needs to change, but it's really very changed to be more modern, more integrated with environmental issues from today. But it has a really big outreach. Ecoparque has been closed for 2 years, closed to the public, and even so, before we were closed, it received more than 12,000 children, people, most of them children, a year. So that's a lot. And even now, the people that are in the environmental education program, although they don't reach 12,000 people in Ecoparque, they have gone outside and they've reached a lot. They go to the area. They have a program that's called Ecoparque va a tu casa. Ecoparque viene, goes to you. Ecoparque goes to you, and that's the program that they have been developing after we had it closed. We hope to open by next year, by this year, the middle of this year again. What's the legal framework of this? As you can see, well, we have for the city, and to see what we can do when we're talking about green infrastructure. The framework is really very weak, although it has a very, very defined things that we can take into account. The problem is that we don't enforce them, and that's the problem. But first, these are the legal framework of things that that we can use for Tijuana in order to develop green infrastructure proposal. And one of them has to do with a federal law, water law, that supposedly it's prohibited to construct on both sides of a natural, on a buffer area of a natural waterway. That's not what happens, but that's supposed to be like that. And the second law also specifies urban settlements laws that are federal and local and are at the state and the municipal level. They all say that in 35% slopes you can't construct. That also doesn't happen, but that's what the law says. And municipal areas, suppose the municipalities and states can do natural protected areas. They don't. In the state, there's no natural protected area by the state. The state hasn't done any natural protected area, nor the municipality. And but they can do it. They have the faculty to do it. As for green areas, what we have is we don't have a federal it's something that guides, federal guides that has a more comprehensive view. There's just this one from Sedesol, that's a recommendation from Sedesol that has a very social point of view. It doesn't have this all this environmental benefits view and this interconnection between green areas. Nevertheless, no municipality takes into account this. Most of them, they do whatever they want, because I'm doing a study of the 30 municipalities with more people, more urban area in the country, and what I found out is that they do their own typology, their own definition of green area. Each one does whatever they want, and they do it bad. They don't do it, it's like it's not important for them. And in Tijuana, in Baja California, what happens is that there's no law that makes the government do big parks. They don't have to do it. The only law that talks about parks is it's the one that's for house developers, and that is from 1971. As you can see, it's really outdated, and although it has changed a little bit, it hasn't changed that much. And what they do say is that all house developers must put aside 3% of the area as parks, and that's not that much, because they don't take into account the density of the population. We can see that there was a change in the 1990s in this law, and what they changed is because first what the developers did was taking to consider the greenery as the 3%, the landscape of the streets, but now they don't, they can't do that. And that's why in the maps you can see that most of the parks in the city are really very small. Most of them are less than 1,000, 2,000 square meters. So and the city has not done a big park in 30 years. Not since I came to live to Tijuana. There's not, and that's almost 30 years ago, and there's no big, the only big park that has been new in the city is Eco Park. But there's no other big park. Well, taking into account this, Yasmin, that's not here anymore, made this study in her thesis, and what she tried to do is to see how much connectivity could we achieve by preserving all the natural areas that are in risk areas between the metropolitan area of Tijuana, Tecate, and Rosarito, in all the area that has not been developed. And she did that as a thesis, and this made two scenarios, one that has to do only with the areas that are in the risk areas not developed, and then trying to take into account some areas that are considered with high biodiversity. And she found out, well, the scenarios, they change a lot, and they conserve, and they have a great connectivity that would be good for the city before it goes on it, before it goes. Ecoparque should be a way to, one of the areas I didn't talk about before, but I'd like, some of the technologies I would like to put in Tijuana, if anyone wants to help me, have to do with different techniques to retain slopes. But it should be, very, not very expensive techniques, because we have to think about the people that live here. But if we can show people different techniques of how to retain slopes with different methods or different things, that would be very nice. And I have an area that has really very steep slopes down here that I would like to do a lot of those, to put those techniques. So it could be like a way to show people and what they could do to make better their environment. And so So we can have a reforestation model or slope retention models or that's what we should have, like different kinds of eco park in different parts of the city. That would be the nicest thing to do, you know. And the general idea is taking into account all these areas, all this legislation. We could do this. We could add to public parks and urban greenery. We could add natural protected areas in special ecological sites. But also the most important is that we could add areas of conservation and risk areas that could add a lot and give more resilience to the city and give and reduce a lot the risk for the people that live in the city. And we could do that now. Now, even if the areas are they are not very well preserved, okay? That's all. And I'd like to say this every time I finish, because I know that in the city of Tijuana they look at me and say, well, we need houses, Lina. And I know that we need houses, but once we construct houses, we can't do anything to get natural areas and preserve natural areas. And the way we're doing it, we're putting a lot of people in risk, so that's about it. If you have any questions?
If you have a question in the audience, use the microphone, please.
What financial options do you consider to replicate the model? What financial options do you consider to replicate the model?
Well, that's been a problem. That's been a really big problem. Because we've been for years trying to do it. I'm going to do one more attempt, and that has to do with CONACYT. That's a science and technology state agency.
Like our NSF.
Eh? National Council of Science and Technology. And I'm going to apply for that. Part of what we're doing now, it's COLEF is giving part of the money. And Carlos also has a project that has to do with composting. And there's coming another money from there. And what I'd like to do is reproduce native plant so we can sell it. And if we can sell it, we can attain some money from there. And we would like to do the agriculture, urban agriculture, some courses, some of them free, depending for whom, but also some that we can sell so we can get some money. We're thinking of ways of attaining some money, okay? But that's about it. We've had from here, from there, from different parts. CONACYT, this ¿cómo se llama? Council? ¿Cómo se llama? This council, National Science and Technology Council, has given money before, so we're going to try to get more from them. If you have another idea, I accept it.
I have a question. Well, first of all, congratulations for your conference. And I was thinking, you talk about education. Do you have a model to replicate with the students, with the schools, in order to bring them to, I don't know if to those ecological parks, or at least to other places where they can understand or take awareness of being sustainable in the future? Or do you have something to replicate?
Look, I'm not in charge of the education program. Xiomara is the one that's in charge of that. And I'd like to add some things to what Xiomara is doing. I know she has a really good outreach. I'd like to know all the things that she does because I'd like to add some things to her, but we're going to do it, I suppose, in the near future. But she goes to a lot of places. She has a really big outreach.
So we can have the.
You can talk to her, and she may come to you. She has her program. Ecoparque goes to you, so I suppose she can go.
Thanks for your talk. I was wondering if you've approached any local businesses or whether they've approached you with interest in collaborating, like other nurseries or other businesses that want to try to have their own little eco parks or green areas.
Nurseries in Mexico, most of them are interested in what they can sell. Okay? And I understand them. You know, it's they don't want to reproduce native plant because first they don't have the know-how to do it. That's the first problem. It's not easy to reproduce native vegetation. It's not easy. You know, they talk. It's really nice to talk about it in politics. It's funny, but there's a forestation program legislation. It's a norm in Tijuana, and it says it's better if you make forestation with native plants. Nobody has it. It's really very difficult to reproduce it. If it was, it's not even that easy to find it in the U.S. In California, it's not easy to find it. You have a lot more nurseries that we have that do them, that do reproduce them, but they're not. They don't always have all the species, and they don't have that much number of them. If you want quantity, and anyway, I can't bring them here. You know, and it's not easy because it's really for people. It's very easy to have plants that don't need a lot of work, and although native plants in the long run need less work, people don't know that, and it's easier to work with very genetically manipulated plants that are made for us, growing them and treating them bad, and they still resist, you know, because they're very, very. So it has to be a process. That's what I think. So local business. Then what I'm trying to do, at least with the part that I'm into, and that has to do with native vegetation and with urban agriculture, I'd like to show them first things. So I want to construct this, start reproducing something, and then trying to bring privates, but I need to show them something. And I think that's could be a better way to do it.
Do the development entitlements like that come in for development is there any way to organize their 3% conservation into one area so they're not just preserving little postage stamps of 3%, they can conserve in one area and use those 3% to add up to some larger park?
Again?
Okay. So you said earlier in your talk that each development has to put away 3% for conservation or whatever, and they end up being these little postage stamps or roadway greenery. Is there any way to organize them to all put their 3% into one larger park?
That would be great if you knew.
Yeah.
If you could get together 10 developers in one site, and that doesn't happen.
That doesn't happen.
The problem with the developers in Mexico, the urban developers in Mexico, is that during the past 10 years they have done whatever they want. You know, that aside of the municipality, and that's because they have a lot of. About 10 years ago, federal government discovered that most of the poor are not now in the rural areas, but the city areas. So they decided to push urban developers to do houses That has not happened because developers have done houses, but not for poor people, for middle class people. So a lot of people that have gone into these houses we have a problem of abandonment of these houses, and they have done whatever they wanted because the government, the federal government, has given them a lot of incentives to do it. And so they have developed in really very different ways, the ways they want to, wherever they want to, without making a city, without taking into account urban plans.
If I could just add something really quick. Most of those things are done in advance, right? Like Elise used to work for Caltrans as a biologist, right? And so they would have to do these plans and set them out, and that would be easy, right? That you have the developer, they have these different bids that are coming up, and you say, no, put all that 3% in that one area, you know? And we do have those requirements, right? But in places like the canyons here or in the southeast of Tijuana where things are growing the fastest, usually that development is done irregularly. So like the area where I work just over the hill here, really overnight, a bulldozer will come in and take out a whole hillside, right? With no, you know, and in areas that have over 35% slope, they clear everything. That morning, someone will come out and they'll do little lines on the ground and they'll start selling plots before they have a title from the city, before they have any of these things. Because there's a mandate from the Mexican government to build more housing, especially in these areas that are below these large maquilas that need workforce. Really, those laws are essentially ignored on the ground.
That has to do a lot also. In Mexico, there has been a problem, a historical problem with ejidos. Ejidos was a type of ownership, land tenure. That changed in 1992. But although it changed in the law, things have not changed that quite easy because they're communal lands. You know, so it's really very difficult for them to parcelate them. And this in Mexico, it has been very studied. It studied a lot, and I did it with someone, Kathleen Farley from San Diego State University. I did a study of that in what the ejidos does in the growth of the city. You know, it's a legal frame for selling the way Kyle is talking about. That's beginning to change because now they are private. They have changed to private status. But historically, as a city that you saw how the city grew really very fast. If you saw the rate it's not that much. But if you think about 50% has an original origin. 50%, half of the city. And it's the irregular origin is still going on. Not as big as before, but not as much, but it's still going that way.
Okay.
Hi. I just have a question. When you were talking about the native vegetation that you have in Eco Park and the propagation program and to reproduce, don't you? Well, I'm not sure if I understand or correctly, but I was wondering if, because I by myself have difficulties founding native vegetation for my garden. I was trying to make a native garden in my house, but I couldn't find anything. So I was looking for all the Tijuana's parks, and well, I couldn't find it. So that's my question. If you have the program or you have the native plants that there's some way we can approach to you, or we can get some. Is there?
That's the problem. What you're saying is what happens here. You know, I'm just starting. This year I'm starting that because I think there's a demand. There are people that are trying to get some. They don't know where. There's some small groups and people in Ensenada that do reproduce some plants, but they do it in very small quantities. And oh, I can give you 10 dudleyas. Wow. I have to cover 6 hectares. 6 dudleyas, I'm not going to do much, but come on, and it's not easy, Flor. It's not easy to get them. It's not easy. We're starting this year to reproduce, so I'm not sure we can give you. We don't have for Ecoparque. We don't have many. We have introduced some. And originally, when I started Ecoparque, what I did was hydroseeding with native vegetation. It was easier to bring along from the border the seeds, okay, than the plants. And I did hydroseeding, and it started really very well. The problem was that I went to do my PhD, and other people came to Ecoparque. I'm not going to say names. But other people came to Ecoparque and said, this is too hilly, we should put something really nice. So let's put ice plants so they can see it really very green. So all the native seeds that I had originally disappeared. And we now have eucalyptus and all that stuff that I don't know what I'm going to do with it, but I can't take it out now. But I think with time we're going to start changing. Some of the plants that I do have native, they're not many, have been for land use change. We've obtained them from land use change areas.
Lina, ¿conoces casos en los cuales se han implementado corredores de vegetación para recuperar parches, es decir, que de alguna forma se reúnen? My question was related to have you ever come across of vegetation corridors implemented in order to recover patches into urban areas?
What I've read in the literature is that Europe and United States are taking into account this green infrastructure perspective in their development plans or in their sustainable development plans, and they're doing a lot of stuff that has to do with that. They're putting it into the development plan. They consider it. They consider it, and now they are considering it as one of the main areas that help plan the cities and the urban areas. And so there are a lot of plans with really very inventive and ingenious strategies, and in Europe and in the United States also. What I tried to develop is something that would be really very easy for Mexico, because it's also, we also have the problem that people that have to do in Mexico with natural resources or with urban parks are not professionals. They're the wife of somebody or the friend of someone that doesn't know anything, and it's not professionalized. No, it's not made by the profession, but the people who know about it, and that's what brings a lot of problems. But it has been one of the backbones of the new way of developing urban plans. It's in the world. It's beginning to be. So there are a lot of projects with that.
I don't know if you have experience in Santiago, because the urban area in Santiago is mainly eucalyptus. It looks beautiful, right? But it's not native at all in California or even in America. But do they have some kind of plans to recover native vegetation in the area, in the urban area?
Well, I know on campus right now there's a huge effort. Again, it's covered in eucalyptus, and if we take those out, then we have slopes and all these other problems. I used to work for the state parks for a while, and they had the same problem. They had eucalyptus everywhere. They had Mexican palms, right, like that look all beautiful but don't belong there. And they were just pretty much waiting for fire to take them out. And then once they're gone, they never come back. We do have some nurseries. Actually, Elise probably knows a lot more about this from. Yeah. And the state of California, state parks, all these people, they all have mandates that when they do development, they have to do it with native plants now. So it's been enshrined. Whether or not that's easy to get, I don't know.
It's easier then.
But it's a lot easier, and we can't bring it across the border because we already tried.
I know that. And they also have in California, they also have, and in San Diego County, they have a program that's called the Multiple Species Conservation Program. And
I actually work for the Department of Fish and Wildlife and the NCCP program. So there's a law in California, the Natural Community Conservation Planning Act, and basically allows jurisdictions to enter into these large planning area where they conserve a certain area, which is kind of how I was getting at the 3%. They said this is the area of high quality habitat. All the development should try to mitigate for their impacts here. So it kind of makes through law all the developers mitigate in a certain area, and they also have to provide money with their development entitlements for the management of the area. So it's all through plans through the Multiple Species Habitat Conservation Plan, which is the one in California and San Diego County and City of San Diego. But each jurisdiction gets to do their own, but they all have to comply with the law. And that helps you mandate, you have to, take the species and put them somewhere else. When you develop the area, you have to use natives. If you're on the edge of the preserve, you have to put your lighting away from the preserve. Like all these things are, so I would say the best way to get the government to help.
there's a program, a national program that's working more or less, but at another scale, not at an urban scale. And that's called El Corredor Biológico Mesoamericano. The problem is that it's Mesoamerican. Mesoamerica starts in the middle of Mexico south, okay? What they're trying to achieve is to, with this same principle, to make the land that's in between the natural protected areas, all the reservas de la biosfera and all those that we have in South Mexico, to get the land to produce more sustainable ways, so it would construct corridors between them. And so they're working in the land that's in between these natural protected areas. And that's one that's being done at the federal, but as I tell you, it's at another scale. We do things like a lot of years behind. Okay, plans. I'm making a study on the biggest cities of Mexico and the plans they do and what they conceive as a green area, urban green area, and they have. It's it's like a Montessori. Every does whatever they want, so it's like a Montessori school. You do whatever you want. And that's one of the problems. They have really very different concepts in the way they do, but they're starting to have this notion of environmental benefits, and they're starting to have this notion of that they have to do that there are things like green belts or corridors, or and they put them in the plan, although they don't know really what they are, and as everything, it's a process, and I hope that with time this is going to get more and more each time. It's just what I've seen now is really very sad. We have really very low indicators of green urban areas, and most of them are in very bad shape. There's a federal program that has to do with rescuing parks in the cities, And although they've been doing very good stuff, it's really very few. They don't have that much money, and they don't. One of the problems is that they don't look at in a way that we can get together different things. So what they do is they put just a small department that has parks and recreation area, and they don't give them any money, and they don't associate with people of the health or of recreation or culture or other areas. That would be very good for them. And it's really all in different parts.
Actually, on that subject of municipal governments, what do you think it would take for municipal governments to sort of adopt this eco-parque strategy? Is like information campaigns or sort of private-public partnerships or just lobbying?
Okay, there's a small program that started some years ago that has to do with adopt a greenery, and adopt a park, The problem is that what we have is that we change the municipality every 3 years. And one of the things that happens a lot in Mexico is the ones that come don't continue with the ones that were doing before. And so the process, when you put a program like that, is a process. And if you don't continue it starts fading out. It can start with a lot of input and a lot of people doing it and let's do it, and then they stop because there comes another municipal government, and lately we've been changing parties a lot, and that doesn't help either, even if it's the same party. Well, that's what I think. I don't know what everybody said, but they change a lot. So if someone in one party put a program, the next party that comes to a government usually doesn't continue the program, and so it doesn't have time for the program to go into a process and get into the people. And in Mexico City there have been progress, but that's the same party that has been for years. And so you can see that when they started to make this recycling on the trash and separate the garbage, nobody started with it at first, and 10 years later you can see not everybody does it, but you now have at least 50% of the population that's doing it. So it's a process. But when you don't do it and you change it every 3 years, but that won't happen, and it's like throwing money to the garbage. That's what I think. There was a problem with that. I don't see it moving a lot. What I see in these 20 years or more studying parks, and that's nice, I see more people and more parks getting adopted by people that are around them. I haven't done it, but I would like to know what makes them do that. Why some do it and some others don't. But that didn't happen before, and now there are more small parks being taken by people, and managing them. If anyone wants to go to Eco Parque, just tell me.
Okay, so if everyone with me will help thank Dr. Lina Ojeda Reba. And then maybe next quarter we plan a trip to Eco Parque with our group or something.
Yeah,
we can figure something out like that.
Whenever you want to.
Because it'll be nice. Nice in May or something like that. But yeah, thank you for everybody for coming. Gracias a todo quien hablaron en inglés por todo. Lo siento por mi español, como siempre. And we hope we invite anybody who wants to come with us. We'll go downtown tonight and have a dinner that's paid for on our grant. Anybody who wants to come is invited. Please join us. Thanks.
Ok, muchas gracias y bueno, también están invitados. Tenemos unos ambigús aquí en el corredor y están invitados a comer y a tomar algo.